Hey guys, I know it's been a very long time since I posted anything on this site, but felt like doing it something today. I've got my reading glasses on because I'm going to be doing a little bit of reading, a little bit. And I was going to talk a little bit about the battles of the person that known by legend as King Arthur, who historically may have been named Artorias. Perhaps he lived, perhaps he didn't. I don't think we'll ever know, the truth of that. So what we have left behind is a legend. And during the late 5th century and early 6th century Britain, as some of you may know, after the fall of the Western Empire of Rome, Britain was left on its own, and the Britons were facing attacks mainly from the Anglo-Saxons, not just in a group, but various tribes of Anglo-Saxons and various Germanic tribes that were coming into Britain, claiming land for themselves, and would eventually take over most of the land, and the land would become known eventually as Anglo land or England, and the Angles or English were the main for a time ruling body of the land. Of course, then came William the Conqueror and the Normans, and then Henry II and the Plantagenets and all that. But this is just early into the English invasion. We have the what are called the Picts invading from the north, and some of the Scots tribe who were actually Irish, and at that time, anyways, the North at that time wasn't quite the Scotland of, say, medieval times or of today. It was very much, barbaric, quote unquote, tribes of the North that were coming down to the south, invading. And, Irish would come to settle parts in those northern lands, partly in what would later be called Wales, and what became, called Cornwall. And the Britons were, trying to fight these people off. And, they're fighting many battles. And Arthur is supposed to have led the Britons against the Saxons. He wasn't, it's noted in the history of Nennius that he had 12 battles against the Saxons. But he wasn't a king, Nennius states. He leads the kings, and it's stated in Nennius that Arthur is the Dux Bellorum, or Duke of Battles. And, he's leading the kings and the Britons against the Saxons. So, Nennius states, Arthur fought against the Saxons along the kings of the Britons, but he himself was the leader in the battles, the Dux Bellorum in the battles. The first battle was at the mouth of the river which is called Glin, Glein. The next 4 were on the banks of another river, which is called Douglas. He spells it Dubglas, and is in the region of Linnaeus. The 6th was upon the river which is called Bassus, Basssas. The 7th in the wood of Celadon, that is Catcoit Celadon, and that's a forest in the northern realm of what's called the Godothin. And this forest is between, the wall of Hadrian is here. Here's the forest, and here's up here the wall of Antony, which is earthworks that later, came down. Anyways, the 8th was by Castle Gwynnion, Guinnnion, in which Arthur carried on his shoulders, some translate this as being on his shield, an image of Saint Mary ever Virgin. And there was great slaughter of them, the Saxons, and through the strength of Jesus Christ and of Holy Mary, his main mother, Arthur wins the battle. Because, again, these are according to, the Britons, heathen, invaders. They worship Woden, which is a version of Odin. And at that time they're pagan. It wouldn't be until years later that the English would become Christianized. Roman Catholics. So here, it's Arthur using the power of his faith against the quote-unquote heathens that he's opposing. The ninth battle was in the city of the Legion. There's been debates about where that is. The most common is Caerleon, which is by the River Usk. That's one possible. There are other locations. The 10th battle was on the bank of the river that is called Tribuat. Tribruit. The 11th on the hill called Aint. The 12th battle was on Mount Badon. It sometimes gets called, spelled Badon, and I'll get back to that in a minute, in which on that one day there fell one onslaught of Arthur's 960 men, and none slew them but he alone. And in his battles he remained the victor. So these are 12 battles against the Saxons that Arthur is supposed to have fought against the Saxons. Now, in the annals of the Carmarthen, these Welsh annals, there's listed 2 battles that Arthur has fought. In the year 516, it's listed the Battle of Badon. Again, I'll get back to that. In which Arthur carried the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, and for 3 days and nights on his shoulders, again, probably shield. And he and the Britons were victorious against the Saxons in Badon. And then in 537, thereabouts, there's the Battle of Camlan, in which Arthur and Medrawt were slain, and there was death in England and Ireland. Now, many years later, Geoffrey of Monmouth, with his so-called History of Kings, he also lists some of these battles. He mentions the River Douglas battle. He mentions the Battle of Selden Wood, and he places the great battle at Bath, which the Romans would have called Aquis Sula, or Sulis. And he only mentions part of these battles. He didn't mention all of them. And there's been debates about a lot of these battles. Getting back to what is called Badon. Some people debate where this is located. Again, Geoffrey clearly states that this great battle is at Bath. And there's been debate about that. And it's most commonly, again, spelled B-A-D-O-N with one D. But there are older Celtic Welsh texts that have the battle at Badon, but they spell it in the older, Welsh Brytonic spelling, B-A-D-D-O-N. Now, for these Celtic Welsh speakers, 2 D's has a TH sound. So it's Bathon, not Badon. So I think Geoffrey is very correct in listing the battle at Badon, Bath, and having the great battle there. And it's supposedly, again, this is his great battle against the Saxons, and the Saxons are halted in their tracks, and for many years, the Saxons don't advance. Historically, in archaeological terms, this seems to be largely correct. The Britons were able to hold off the Saxons. Maybe they were led by a warlord named Artorius, maybe not. We'll never know. And it's not until much later that eventually the Saxons are able to move forward and just dominate the land. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Gildas, is very reprimanding of the Britons. He's living during this time frame. He doesn't mention Arthur, but he mentions various tyrant kings and how the Britons are at war with each other, and he's very upset that the Britons aren't unified, and because of their failings, the Saxons win out, and Gildas is very reprimanding of that. So and as time goes on, these battles are mostly forgotten about. I mean, for example, in the what became the Vulgate cycle, and is pretty much the source of Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, we don't hear about these battles at all. We mainly hear about Arthur's battles with other rebel kings. And for a 15th or 13th century audience, which is, when those texts were written, that is very significant because they've had various battles with kings, mainly, in France, the Hundred Years' War and so on. Edward III, going off fighting other kings, or, English kings fighting with Saxon kings, or even, Welsh princes, the remnants of the original Britons. So that spoke very much to them. But because, again, they're English, the battles against Saxons, doesn't resonate with them. Of course, most of these texts are written in mainly Norman times, and again, Plantagenet times. But still, they don't want to focus too much on the Saxon battles. That doesn't mean Geoffrey's out of the public mind. I mean, it's said that even Richard III had a copy of Geoffrey, so it was read, and again, it was the favorite book of Henry II. He goes to Wace, and he wants Wace to translate Geoffrey, who's writing in Latin. And he tells Wace, translate this into French, because Plantagenets and much of the Norman courts, they're speaking French. So and Wace dedicates the book to Eleanor of Aquitaine, who, of course, we know founds the courts of love, and her daughter is the patron of Chrétien de Troyes, or de Troyes, and he is, of course, the originator of the Grail legend. Especially after Edward III and then on, we have very much a popularity of the Arthurian myth, these Vulgate texts. And during Edward IV, we have Mallory's texts. But at the downfall of the Plantagenets and the rise of the Tudors, the Arthurian myth kind of dwindles, partly because, again, Mallory is the ultimate in Arthurian literature. There are many greats like Geoffrey or Chrétien and so on. Yes, certainly, but Thomas Mallory is the greatest Arthurian writer ever. And I say that even compared to most modern books. Name me any writer in Arthurian book, he is the best of the writers. And it's from him that most of our modern writers draw from. Even when they try to get away from it, they still can't entirely. But anyways, And I think another part is it's it's the end of the Plantagenet era. The Tudors, Henry Tudor and his Tudor line, they bring the world into the more to them modern Tudor Renaissance way of thinking. Arthur is not out of the consciousness, but there's not as much literature at that time. And maybe that's true. I'm right with this, maybe not. But anyways, I just wanted to talk briefly about those battles. And I think it's interesting how the legend has developed over the years. And again, maybe there was this person, maybe he fought some of these battles. I think definitely, if any of these battles, he fought Bathon or Baden. And the Saxons were held back for a while, and the Britons, for a time, were able to keep them back, but they were eventually pushed back into what came to be called Wales. Anyways, hope you've enjoyed this rambling, and you have got something out of it. Take care, guys.